Hey there, how you doing today? I hope this finds you well. Today we're going to be in Genesis chapter 19. We've been sort of progressing through Genesis a little at a time. And I think we started back in chapter 14 with the slaughter of the kings. And today we're in chapter 19. And I'm not going to go to the normal places you would go to in 19, Lot's in Sodom, but I want to look at Lot in the gate of Sodom. Peter tells us that Lot was a just man and that his righteous soul was vexed day by day as he had beheld all the wickedness in his city. And so with that as a theme, I thought maybe we could look at the very beginning of the chapter as Lot encounters the angels who arrive in Sodom. And, sort of give us a little model for how we're to behave as we live in Sodom. Sodom is a city, and it doesn't have a beginning and an ending. Sodom is sort of a model for the generations that come and go, the generations of men who live according to the ways of man. Anyway, so Lot finds himself there. He's in the city of the generations of men living according to the ways of men, and he's sitting in the gate, which is a good thing. That city needed a righteous man to sit in the gate. So there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and bowed himself with his face toward the ground. So Lot sees these men coming. He's a judge because the judges sit in the gate, and he's there at evening, so he's been there all day, probably adjudicating cases and trying to help Sodom live right. And here he sees the angels come. And he rises up from his seat. Judges didn't normally do that. They sat, and others stood before them. He comes and he stands before the angels and then bows himself before them. This indicates to us that he knew who they were. He may have not known they were angels, but he knew they were dignitaries from some place. And so he bows before them, giving them honor. So Lot knows how to do his job. He's there in the evening time. He's not a slacker at all. He's bowing, rising up and bowing before these men, so he recognizes their authority. And then he says, come into my house. Let me entertain you tonight. Now, the habit of traveling people in that day was to stay in the city square. They would just camp out unless they were taken in by someone. But the angels refused Lot's invitation. They said, no, we'll just stay in the street. And Lot said no. And it says there that in verse 3, he pressed them. Now we find another pressing that happens later on down here in, in verse 9, where the men of Sodom pressed against Lot. So it's an insistence. In the men of Sodom's case, it's a physical insistence. They're actually putting their hands on him. In verse 3, he pressed them, that is, he insisted that they come to his house. Why would he do that? Because he knew what would happen if they tried to stay in the street. And so he's, again, this righteous man is doing righteous things, isn't he? He's offering hospitality to these men. Not only that, but he wants to protect them. And then it says that he made them a feast. So not only did he give them shelter, not only did he protect them from the men of Sodom, but he gave them a feast. He threw a ball for them, and all, at his expense. And then when the men of Sodom come knocking, before they laid down, there in verse 4, both old and men, all the people from every quarter, they called to Lot and said, where are the men which came to thee this night? Bring them out to us. And then what happens is Lot goes out and he refuses their request. So he puts himself in the way of harm. He says, no, these men are under my protection. You're going to have to deal with me. And then he offers his daughters. He says, don't bother them because they're under my house. You see, the responsibility of the people of Sodom is to take care of those that come to visit them. They should have been wanting to guard Lot and his lodges there, but they weren't. All they could think about was their own selfish and ungodly needs and desires. So Lot stands in the gap. And the men eventually, of course, come in and pull Lot out of the trouble and take care of business. But he's a righteous man. And as I said at the beginning, this is a model for us. A model for how we should live life in an ungodly generation, because we live in Sodom too. Sodom is everywhere. Sodom is everywhere men live according to their ungodly needs and desires and ways. But when we live according to the Lord's way, the Lord's going to take care of us. Lot is living according to the Lord's way. Now, Lot falls down because we see that the angels actually have to pull him out of Sodom. Lot's buried so deep into Sodom, he's like a tick on a hound dog's back. He didn't want to let go, but the angels drag him out. He and his wife and his 2 daughters. And that's later on in the story. But this tells us something about how the godly live amongst the ungodly. I hope this blesses you today. I hope it encourages you to live for Christ, even though the world around you has gone just a little bit crazy. So I'll see you again next time. God bless you guys. I miss you. Bye.